All right, pick one. Pick one. Who should we go on?
I think MOUZ. MOUZ to me is one of the most annoying ones. Mongols as well, but MOUZ obviously were the second best team in the world, arguably together with Team Spirit when Vitality won every single tournament. They just could not beat Vitality in any grand finals, but they would consistently get into the semifinals, they would consistently get into the grand finals, and then they would consistently lose to Vitality. It does feel like ever since they beat Vitality in Cologne and actually got into that grand final against a different team, they've just gotten worse and worse and worse. And it even started at the major. People forget that, and I hate it. Even when I argue against some of my colleagues as well. You look at the results for MOUZ at the Austin Major. They got into a semifinal. Congratulations. They played like shit.
People forget the Swiss stage, don't they? They do. Yeah, exactly. They deleted it completely.
Like shit, and then they were quite lucky with the draw of the bracket. They were quite lucky with the level of the teams actually making the playoff, but they probably should have been eliminated by Team Liquid, going 0-3 in the group stage, and that would have been a fucking disaster. But people conveniently just forget about that because on the scoreboard it looks like great. Oh, semi-final at a major. How can you say they played bad? Well, if you watch how they played their game, they were nowhere near the level they were a couple of months before. I remember the grand final in Lisbon when they were playing Vitality. I think Vitality won 3-2, and MOUZ lost the first maps 13-0 or something, then came back 1-2 maps in a row, and I was like, okay, this is the best looking MOUZ I've seen play. What I saw during Austin, they were not even playing at 70 or 80% of that MOUZ, but they still got a result out of it. So at Austin, my take was, okay, that's a proper team. That's a good team. When you're playing your B game, you still get into a semifinal at a major. Well done, kudos. Now get back to your A game at Cologne. Now get back to your A game post-player break, and maybe you start winning tournaments. The issue is they have not been getting back to that A game. They're going into a semifinal here at Pro League. They're not a bad team. They're not looking bad at all. They're just stagnated. It's like I'm finding it very hard to find a reason as to why I should believe MOUZ can win the major. Why all of a sudden should they come into the major and win? Like, what is it that's going to change that hasn't changed the last 10 months from then being consistently a top 2, 3, 4, 5 team in the world to all of a sudden being the best and winning the major? I don't see anything that's changed within their camp. I don't see any player all of a sudden hitting a form that would be like, okay, that's the guy you wanna put your money on. It does feel like MOUZ is a very good team, but that's it. They're a very stable team. They'll be part of the playoff for the major for sure, but they're not going to win it. And I think that's the most frustrating thing. If you're a MOUZ fan, it just feels like they're stagnated. And what's the next move? Are you going to change? Players? Are you going to change the way you approach the game, the positions, etc., etc.? Are you going to find a different in-game leader than Broland? Like, what is the next step for MOUZ to take that? I think if they don't find success in the major, I'm pretty sure they will do something in the offseason, because I think the players themselves are getting fed up with just being stagnated. Being number 2, 3, or 4 in the world is great, but if you have ambitions of winning and you're never winning, then it doesn't feel great at all.
Yeah, what's funny is this actually just feels like we can reboot the conversations of the second season last year. Remember at the end, what everyone was doing was, because if you remember, MOUZ was actually like one step lower even. They were more like a 3rd or 4th best team, and they would make the semis and then not win the tournament. Or they'd win like a bullshit pro league in a studio where no one gave a fuck. And so it never felt like it counted towards, you're going to win the major or whatever. Because if you remember, everyone already was sort of out on that squad. Admittedly, this is one before they did the Spinks and Brolan role swaps. And everyone's talk at the time was, right, these players should just go to the other teams. Like, why doesn't this player go to FaZe and then this guy go to G2 and this guy go to Team Liquid? And if we do that, I mean, the joke is in the end, we actually did end up on Team Liquid, but not the way we expected. The premise, I think it's the same concept again, Pimp. I have seen this team hit a really high peak, as you're saying, like basically like about the middle part of season 1, and then they sort of, the results maintained, but I think the level went way down. Like, by the way, I totally agree with you about the major. The problem is them actually playing like well against Vitality made everyone forget that, like, bro, they, in all those elimination matches in the Swiss, they were like almost out of the tournament. Like, people had them down, on the second map, or in the third map they'd be way down, and the amount of miracle comebacks just to get through Swiss was crazy. So I know what you mean. Like, that was definitely not their best CS. They weren't even playing the best teams at the time to do that either. Like remember, Team Liquid was whatever Legacy's never been a famous team at all anyway. A fucking Aurora themselves are nearly always there to get knocked out. I know what you mean. That was not great CS. And the worst thing is, they do look like each tournament after that, they just get slightly worse, mate. And so for me now, like, I'm not surprised when people like Falcons beat them now. I expect them to. I expect like these 3 or 4 teams to be better than them right now. And the worst factor is, I also think the same thing. The real problem you have in MOUZ is this. you have to remember, if you look at the context of the org, then the org's killing it, right? What a fucking great set of players they've got together. Even the whole story's great of how they brought them through their academy squad, and some of them went to other teams, but they got them back, etc. All that sounds great. But the problem is, if your actual mission is like win the major or the biggest trophies in the world, I'm with you. I don't think this team does it, unfortunately. In fact, what's sad is I would say the success of this team is they've done an amazing job establishing the flaw of the team. And there's no bad players in this team, in my opinion. That is a success. Like, wow, what a great job for a team like MOUZ. They're not a Falcons money, bro. I would bet, if anything, they're probably actually, by their standards, overpaying these players to keep them in their squads. I imagine when someone like a Yimfat signs a deal, he probably gets a pretty good deal, actually good salary that would be comparable to if he'd, not maybe Falcons, but if he'd have gone to a FaZe Clan or, a G2 or Vitality, the types of teams we also expect they might go to. But the issue becomes, right, they don't really have any of the things that I think make you like the best team. Like, I do think you need a superstar player. They don't have one. Again, they have a great baseline of players, but they don't, even, by the way, even they know they don't have it. Like, if you asked Torji, you was good as Monacy, he'd tell you no. If you had Exertion, he was good as Donk, he'd laugh in your face, mate. Like, they know they aren't that. So I think by committee, you can do a lot still. You can make some semis, you can make the odd final, but you don't have an all-time great IGL. There's an obvious one. But if you want to gamble, I know it sucks because if you brawl it, you did a great set of results on your Wikipedia, but I do look at that and I always think the same thing. I think, mate, everyone can tell me Carrigan's washed, but if Carrigan walked into this team and took Brolan's seat, bro, he might win like the first fucking tournament. Like, this would be an awesome squad of players. Like, right now, this squad's better than his FaZe Clan lineup of players. So my two problems become, one, I'm with you. At the end of this year, if you don't win the major, I think you just should gamble anyway, because you've tried like 2 different years of cores of this squad. You try something different. Keep most of the players, yeah, but pick which player. Could be IGL. Again, there might be a few available. Maybe there is a world where Alexi B gets kicked from fucking Navi. So who knows what's going to happen with the other squads? If those players are available, you do that move. Or the other one to me that people aren't thinking about again is, if I am some of those players, I think of what Rops did in FaZe Pro. I go, wait a minute. Rops himself was like, I can't just carry this team on my own. I need to get to a team with more firepower. And now he wins everything. If I'm some of those guys, I'm rethinking that convo from last year, Pip. If I am Yimfat, look, he's not in the best form, but I'll tell you what, if people need some sort of like a fucking archetype player, maybe I'm the only person who's available with a big name. If I am the Exertions of the world, the only one I feel like probably can't is maybe Spinks, because I feel like maybe he's got some baggage. People still wonder what happened in Vitality. I imagine it's probably not good stories if you ask them. But if I feel like that's the other reason, Pip, if I'm MOUZ, I would gamble, is surely these players aren't just going to stay in your team for like 5 years if you don't win. Surely eventually they're going to start having the same thought, like, wait a minute, maybe I could go and be like the second option on a team that then wins everything. Surely there's offers out there for me.
Yeah, I think it's. I think that's a great point, because you need something to motivate your players to stay winning your team, and the only way you do that is if you change something. If you, as you said, if you're Exertion, if you're Chelsea, if you're even Jimfat to some degree, you're probably looking at other teams being like, okay, what happens if G2 all of a sudden needs a new player, or what happens if FaZe all of a sudden finds out that Jacob is not the guy they thought they could make him? Is that interesting for me to then make the swap and join, at least per name value, a bigger organization and a team with more firepower? That's one angle. Another one is that if you're MOUZ, as you said, I think you need to do everything you can in order to keep the core of this team together, which I think is very possible to do, considering where they come from. It's still a relatively young squad. Grew up in MOUZ Academy. They probably have a little bit more loyalty to MOUZ than some players would have, and it's probably I hate that fucking word. When you speak players and loyalty to a club, it's fans are delusional when it comes to that. Look at the football world. No player should have loyalty to a club, because it's you're working at the club. Like it's an exchange of money, for your performance at a club. And yes, if you love your club and you love where you are, sure, you can show loyalty. But the fact of the matter is that 98% of all players, whether that be football players or Counter-Strike players, don't really care at the end of the day. They want to win trophies. They want to motivate themselves. They want to earn money. So as much as the fans would love players to feel some sort of connection to the team, it's not the case in most of the teams, in most of the scenarios. But I do think there's a degree of it in MOUZ, which should make it easier for them to keep the core of the lineup together. I agree. And unless they don't have to win the major for me, but they have to probably get to the final or get to the semi-final and then lose a ridiculous semi-final against Vitality, or lose a game where you're like, we should have won this or whatever, to confirm that they still believe that now next season we can start to win again. Because it does feel, like you said, they're getting further away from the big trophies. Results-wise, it's not bad, but I would gamble 100%. But that's the next issue for me. I think it's very tough right now for MOUZ to navigate the market of players, because I do think that obviously, post the major, there will be great players on the market. There will be players who are getting kicked from their teams. There'll be players who are looking to new teams. There'll be probably new talents coming in and getting a chance. But I think MOUZ don't have the same pulling degree still as
Certainly.
the likes of, dare say, FaZe, Na'Vi, G2 for that matter as well. It does feel like it's just based on name value, and I think it's underrated to some degree, that some players will still look at a G2, they'll still look at a FaZe, they'll still look at Falcons for that matter, and be like, if I had to choose between MOUZ and G2, it's probably better in the G2 camp, I think I can get more money, I think it's a bigger project, etc., etc. So I think that's the next big issue for MOUZ, that they have a very solid lineup right now. As you said, there's no bad players at all, and if they do gamble, they need to make damn sure that gamble is, you can never make sure it's worth it, but you need to make sure that there's at least a player that is worth the gamble, and I think that could be difficult for MOUZ to have that attraction power, unless, as you said, they're willing to break the bank, and maybe outbid a player that is wanted by both FaZe or G2 or Falcons for that matter, which seems unlikely, but possible for MOUZ. So I think they're probably the team in the most interesting position, because I'm not completely writing them off for the main. I'm not completely writing this 5-man roster off, but the more I see them, the more I lean towards probably change something, try something new. Otherwise, you probably risk, as you said and described, that some of the players within the team are like, okay, we're just stagnated right here. What are we doing? Why are we trying the same thing over and over again? If I'm Exertion, why am I wasting, what's supposed to be my best years now, on a team that is not doing enough to try to change whatever we can change to win? So I think MOUZ, to me, is the most interesting of all those teams stagnated right now by far. And then obviously Spirit, the Mongols, etc. is
by the way, different. I know what you mean on the loyalty angle. Like, first of all, I do think it is bullshit, because if you notice, it's nearly only ever invoked in terms of the player be loyal to the team, and it's almost never used. In fact, when they go the other way, they always don't. They just say it's business. They say, but
look at Rain and FaZe. If there was any loyalty, would you kick Rain 2 months before?
No, of course 10 years not. With the exactly.
Club? What the fuck?
Yeah, by definition, it's disloyal. Yeah,
exactly. And yeah, sure. If you were getting Nico instead of Rain, then sure, go ahead. Do it and claim it's business. But you're replacing Rain with a player that you're not even sure if he's better.
No, exactly.
Worse as of right now. So it's ridiculous. That whole concept of loyalty it only exists in the fans world. And I hate it. It's too sentimental.
But here's the thing. I actually, in fact, as a result, I personally don't even take that as my read as to why the MOUZ players stay. If I had to guess, I actually think they stay, bro, because they've got an environment they enjoy playing in. It looks like, but it's weird. Pro players are really bad, especially in CS. They're really bad at hiding when they're not enjoying things, mate. Like, MOUZ actually does look like they have a really good environment within the team, and people look like they don't get unduly blamed, or people know what their job is. And it is one of those squads. It seems that they win as a team and lose as a team and all that. But I'll tell you, the problem I have for them is, I also think, I agree with the name aspect, by the way. Even if G2's results weren't as good as MOUZ, in your brain, if you see G2, it's a lot easier to think to yourself, I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, but if I have a G2 jersey on, isn't the chances that in 2 years I suddenly have a bunch of good players around me and we're winning better than if I'm in MOUZ? Because what people realise is, this is actually the one core of MOUZ that they've done this with. We could go back to the days where they are just like superpowered OG, and they just have a bunch of good players and all right players and players you're hoping on and players that haven't made it. That's a different world. The other thing as well, I think, is the problem. This is why I wonder if some of the players will leave the team, Pim, because I do feel like a really strong aspect that a lot of casual fans maybe don't appreciate is, I do think players do have a sort of sense, almost like a superstition, that if you are someone who has won in the past, that then they want to play with you. They feel like that means you sort of get something about it, or you know something about winning. Like, even if it's not necessarily manifesting now, I do think actually, I mean, the extreme examples would be people like Fallen. He hasn't won in a long time, mate, in terms of massive tournament. But if you're a Brazilian player, again, in your brain, you can imagine being in a team with Fallen and it's all a winning, whereas you don't know maybe Big Azir is better as an IGL, but who the fuck knows, right? You don't know, does he know how to win when he's in a final? I do think that's why actually the team that currently lives off that still, and they better fucking sort it out this season, mate, or they're done, is FaZe. Right now, they still have some of that cachet, Pimp. People still feel like if you join FaZe, like, I think it's why Twisted it. He feels like, right, it didn't work in Liquid. Well, I go back to FaZe. I'll play with Carrigan. Somehow, question mark, and then we're winning again. Yeah, we're back to the old. I do feel like that's underrated, and unfortunately, MOUZ doesn't have that. They don't have proven winners in their team right now, unfortunately.
No, that's the biggest issue. It's a fun thought experiment to do, and maybe for another episode, But when you look at a team, try to think, what is the attraction power of joining MOUZ, as you said, like it's not yet the brand value. Sure, it's a big name, but it's not a G2, it's not a FaZe, it's not a Na'Vi for that matter at all. There's probably 7 or 8 brands that you'd think of international Counter-Strike Rise that is bigger than MOUZ, because as you said, it's just recently they found success where they're actually playing Counter-Strike at a high level. I think the biggest attraction they have, and it may sound ridiculous, but you said it yourself, and I think it's a great point. The environment they play in seems to be great. I think MOUZ as an organization is super, super solid.
But it's with the coach actually might be an attractive element. It seems like a pretty underrated coach, right?
Exactly. That's what I was going to get. Right. I think Cyclone right now is the biggest attraction they have, and it's the same thing as when you join Na'Vi. Like you're not joining. Right now, you wouldn't join Na'Vi because you think they're going to be the best team in the world. You join Na'Vi as a future prospect because you think if you join Na'Vi and Blade gets to teach you Counter-Strike and gets to form you can become maybe the best player in the world if you have that ability, right? You believe that the coach is going to make you a better player. I think it's the same for MOUZ. I don't think you join because it's not like it's not that you don't want to play with Torsi or Exertion. They're great players, but you don't think, oh, I'm going to join them because it's Exertion or Torsi. It's not like Falcons, you're playing with Nico. Everyone wants to play with Nico. Everyone has heard the stories about how Nico made Monesi better, how he's taking them under the wings, and trying to make them better under his leadership. It's not the same thing we hear from Torsi and Exertion. Maybe in the future when they mature a little bit as players and establish themselves more. But right now, I think the biggest attraction MOUZ have is actually the coach and the whole staff behind them. So in terms of my issue, as I said, I want MOUZ to gamble, but I'm also aware of how much can they gamble, because I don't think the player material that would like to join them is strong enough. Maybe it depends on who becomes available on the market post the major. And I think right now their exercise will be to we probably can't attract them based on name value, but we have Cyclone, we have a great track record of you join our team. Well, look at Shuhei, he becomes a great in-game leader. Look at Exertion, he becomes one of the best in his roles. Look at Torsi, what we did with him from the academy days to now. So if you're a young prospect, or if you emerge as one of these must get talent, because let's be honest, Falcons can't keep buying them, and other teams can't keep getting them. So if you're the next Mattis that joined G2, if you're the next guy who's next in line, then you probably could consider MOUZ, because they can present a case to you where we may not be the most sexy team right now. We may not give you the highest salary. We may underpay you by 5K compared to G2 or FaZe or whatnot. But what I can tell you is that we're going to give you 100% of our support. And look what happened with Exertion. Look what happened with Torsi. Look what happened with Jimfan, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's the thing they have to try to sell during the off season if they do decide to go with the route of maybe even changing players. Regardless, maybe Cyclone could be poached by a different team. What if something doesn't work out in Falcons? Like who's the guy you would like to join Falcons instead? Then
no, mate, no one ever puts his name in there, but you're right. Also it depends. If maybe Falcons don't always want to spend the most money. Like this guy's, not only has he brought all those academy players up, I think the underrated one, bro, is not the two that happened this year. So one, he took basically an entry player, someone who even, by the way, by default wanted to be in the playmaker role, made him the IGL. Look, it somehow worked. You can argue how much, but the results are there. Like way better results than anyone thought. And probably the most underrated one is, like I say about Spinks, mate, Spinks as a player, if you took all the fucking nameplates off, he's the top 10 player in the world last year. The problem is the baggage behind the scenes, man. I don't think there was many teams who were going to pick this guy up, mate. It sounds like that might have been his only port of call. And as far as we can tell, there's been no issues. He's just been seamlessly integrated into the squad. He's played some of his best CS. He's given them the firepower. There hasn't seemingly been any sort of behind the scenes turmoil like there was in Vitality. Bro, the Cyclone guy is fucking killing it right now. If anything, where's he put a foot wrong in the last sort of 2 years at this point? So I know what you mean. If you don't want to only just buy the most expensive players and you're Falcons and you want to go the route of why don't we, you've got an academy team now, why don't we find our talents? Why don't we bring up people and develop them? Everyone normally says Ash because he's more famous, he's done a better job doing a YouTube channel. Fucking Cyclone guys killed it, bro. I know what you mean. I think he's mad underrated at this point in time. For me, I've never thought any of these rosters should be where they're at, so I have to give him props.
Yeah, I think he's again probably he has a certain amount of loyalty to MOUZ, given he was part of the academy as well, and that's where he started his coaching career for real. He was coaching some Danish teams, and he was playing even in some academy teams himself, before he retired and became a coach. So I think MOUZ have a greater likelihood of keeping him and making sure that he is part of what could attract new talent into the team. And let's be honest, that's also where MOUZ found success. It's not like they went out and bought players. They were able to retain the players that they somehow managed to foster through the academy. So we had to see MOUZ go out and make, I know Spinks was a big signing obviously, and probably on paper it was a downgrade for Spinks and et cetera, but the context to that is that Spinks was unwanted in Vitality. Right? They had to offload him. They had to get rid of him. They could have let him sit on a contract. That's expensive for Vitality, so they probably got him at a fairly cheap price. will we see a MOUZ that will go out in the offseason and actually put money on the table to buy a player out of a team that is not necessarily unwanted by their team, but is considered a step up? That's the one move we haven't seen MOUZ do yet. And that's what I would be curious to see if they're willing to do in an offseason if they come to the conclusion that they make a change, which I think will happen unless they have a much better major than what we probably anticipate they will right now.
See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.